All right, let's take a look at tech. We do this every Thursday afternoon. Carmi Levy is here, standing by. Take a look at some of the stories that are making news. I want to start with this, Carmi, because, sometimes you come across something, you do a double take, you go, did they do this on purpose? Did they really screw up? So it turns out a Chicago newspaper, this is the Chicago Sun-Times, came out with, and other newspapers do this, I think perhaps most famously the New York Times, a recommended summer reading list. What happened?
Of the 15 entries were wrong. They referred to books that did not exist. The authors were real, but 10 of the 15 books were not. They were apparently generated by AI. They were written by a freelancer. His name is Marco Buscaglia. He says he is completely embarrassed. He takes full responsibility. He can't believe that he missed it because it's so obvious, and he says he makes no excuses. The newspaper said, well, it wasn't us. It was the guy who submitted it. It was a syndication thing. Our newsrooms had nothing to do with it, which is a real easy excuse to make in the age of AI. But if you're buying syndicated content and you're putting it as an insert into your newspaper and publishing it on your websites, you have a duty to double check your work. And just like if you're using AI in your work at the office or for anything, you got to make sure that what's coming back from ChatGPT is in fact real, because in this case, 2/3 of the entries were made up. And I think that shows us we still have a serious hallucination problem with AI. And when people don't check their work and when they assume that what it's generating is okay, they can get into some serious trouble. And that seems to be the case here.
It's interesting, though, because some of the stuff you think would be so routine, right? People do these lists, as I said, all the time. You probably wouldn't think to double check this. You'd assume that, AI could get stuff like this, right? But of course, assuming we know what that does.
Yeah, we keep seeing research reports where they actually test the different models that are available, like from OpenAI and Google and Amazon. And in some tests, they actually get them wrong like 80-90% of the time. And so this is technology that I think illustrates it isn't ready for prime time. AI still has a serious hallucination and going rogue problem. And we just have to assume that, we're going to have to double check a little more frequently than we have up until now. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves in some pretty deep, we'll find ourselves in it pretty deep like this guy did this time. So
let me move on to talk about this other story. We talked not that long ago about 23andMe, the bankrupt DNA company, and thought, would that be the end of it? Turns out, no, it's not. Someone's getting involved here.
Yeah, not the end of it here. So a pharmaceutical company known as Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, an American company, they've bought 23andMe out of bankruptcy. It was at an auction for $256 million US. And their plan is to use the data of the 50 million customer DNA profiles that they have to help them in genomics-driven drug discovery. So you signed up because you thought you were building your family tree, but guess what? Now your data is being used to develop drugs. They have promised to, what they say, prioritize the ethical use of customers' DNA data. But the sad truth here is the terms of service statement that you signed up for that you probably didn't read when you first signed in, it applied to a consumer product. It did not apply to pharmaceutical research. And guess what? There are no laws in the U.S. dealing with this. And this affects Canadians, too, because lots of Canadians use this service. Now their data is in that pool as well.
By the way, I remember when the story first broke, there were people who said, I want to get my stuff back. You could have if you acted early enough, but I guess if you didn't then, what happens now?
Yeah, it's too late now. So the company has already been sold. It is by June 10th, an independent overseer has to report whether all of this is kosher. And by June 17th, the court will weigh in and give its final either approval or non-approval of the transaction. But yeah, when the company first declared bankruptcy, in my reporting, I was sharing, now's your opportunity to go into your account and get rid of your data. You can ask them to not share it, and then hold your breath and hope that they do. Whereas now the company is in bankruptcy. This transaction is pending. It is too late to go in and do anything. If you fail to act, maybe they'll name the drug after you, but it's pretty much too late to pull it back in.
Yeah, that's what you want to have happen. You want to have them name it after you. All right. Then this next story, GPS, I love this because you know what? When you think of the moon, you think, big deal. It's just, kind of, you land. We've seen, other sort of, landers on the moon, whether they end up being sideways or not. They do a little bit of research. Some rocks are dug up. Am I understanding this right? So they're coming up with a GPS-like system. So whoever ends up there next can use it like they would use Waze here?
Pretty much. And, this isn't obviously to find the nearest St. Hubert barbecue location. This is, and on the moon, navigation is really critical because there are giant boulders. There are huge craters. And if you're off by just a couple of meters, you are having a really bad day. And so they're going to work with NASA. It's called Lupin. It comes to us from a Spanish technology consortium. And they demoed the technology last week here on Earth, but they're saying they're going to work with NASA, which is also developing what they call the Lunar Communication Navigation System, which is basically GPS satellites for the moon. And they're all going to build their technology together. European Space Agency, NASA, Japan Space Agency is involved. Canada is contributing expertise as well. And it'll allow autonomous devices, so for example, rovers, as well as manned rovers when the Artemis program gets there, to use this navigation system. Because right now, they're using inertial navigation, LiDAR, and other technologies, and they're also communicating with Earth to figure out where they are, which is very compute intensive, isn't very accurate, and it's also very slow. So if you could just use kind of like the moon version of GPS, it would free up a lot of resources on the moon to do other things, and it would, of course, reduce the possibility that you'll end up with a rover tumbling to the bottom of a crater. Wow. It's pretty awesome technology, and it was a really cool demo. Really glad to see them finally getting it going.
Cool. All right, and then finally this story, you got 1,000 people driving across the U.S., one photo at a time on Google Maps. I have no idea what this means.
It is called Internet Road Trip, and you find it at neal.fun, Neal.fun. And basically what they've done is they've created, it almost looks like you're looking at the Google Maps interface. There's a steering wheel. There are a bunch of arrows that show where the car is going. You see imagery of where you are on the road. It's kind of like watching a road trip movie. And people can log in at any given time. There are about 1,000 people who are using it. I was playing with it a little bit before. There's a live chat there, and everybody votes on what the next move is. Do we keep going straight? Do we turn? You can't use reverse. There is no reverse, but there is a radio. You can actually tune into different radio stations. And so the idea is they're going to keep driving this thing, hopefully across the country indefinitely. Right now it is in Lubec, Maine. Not quite sure where that is, but not that far from Montreal. And it's traveled about 1,200 miles so far. And at some points it has crossed into Canada. So it may very well come to Montreal, who knows? But it's definitely this sort of one of these sort of cool, internet things that some guy just created on a shoestring, and now thousands of people are enjoying.
Very, very cool stuff that's going on. And by the way, you didn't mention AI in that description at all, not once.
No, this is human intelligence.
How you like that, huh?
I love that. Humans deciding where to go. And I love that it's almost like, you have 1,000 people driving a vehicle at the same time, all of them voting on what to do next. That's the ultimate form of democracy on both sides of the border.
Gotta love that. I did have one other story, just real quick. So we've talked TikTok in the past. The U.S. is going to outlaw it. They keep extending their decision. So right now, I guess you still can get it. But there's a story here that I'm not that familiar with, where they say TikTok is saying they're going to try to force teenagers to mediate after 10 o'clock at night. How would that even work? Or does that mean meditate?
Yeah, meditate. So if you're a teenager and you're registered on TikTok and you didn't lie about your age, after 10 o'clock, if you try to use the app, you're going to get a pop-up message that tries to get you to do what they call a guided meditation exercise.
Really? That's the best they could do?
Yeah, well, they're trying to reduce screen time. They're trying to reduce the mental health impact of using this app. They tried a whole bunch of different things. This is the latest. And if you refuse, it'll show an even bigger pop-up, and there are a whole bunch of resources designed to get you to not spend as much time with TikTok. Now, of course, I remember when my kids were in their teens, they could figure out 6 ways from Sunday around these kind of limitations. And the data shows that even though TikTok's trying to keep teens from using their app more than an hour a day, the average is still well above 100 minutes a day. So it's still not quite there yet. But it's yet another way. I think what they're doing is they're introducing all these features because we know that next month is the deadline for them to sell themselves in the U.S. They're trying to show the powers that be that they're doing everything they can to be a good corporate citizen. But if I'm a parent, I'm not buying any of this. It's not TikTok's job to raise my kid. It's mine.
Carmi Levy, CTV tech analyst. Carmi, thank you so much.